Hi again, Year 12. We are looking at Act 3, Scene 3 of Hamlet. We've just analysed Claudius's soliloquy where he admits to killing his brother, which he also admits is a truly unforgivable crime. He wants to pray so that he can be forgiven and his soul can be cleansed, but he isn't actually sorry for what he has done because he's quite pleased to have got the crown and the queen out of it. At the end of his soliloquy, Claudius kneels on stage in order to attempt to pray. So we can see that stage direction there. And then we have Hamlet enter. So don't forget, Hamlet has just come from talking to Horatio after the meta-theatrical device. So we know that he's currently hot-blooded and ready for his vengeance. And then he delivers his soliloquy while standing on stage near Claudius. So I just want you to think about the visual that Shakespeare has created here. So Claudius is physically vulnerable and kneeling, so Hamlet is quite physically dominant at the moment. So visually it's quite a significant moment. All right, so let's get into the actual soliloquy. So Hamlet starts off by saying, "Now might I do it, Pat, now he is praying, and now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven, and so am I revenged." So he's just following through quite logically the sequence of events. So he's saying, now I could quite quickly and easily kill him. Now that he's praying, he's vulnerable, I can kill him. And then he says, okay, so, and now I'll do it. And then he says, and then what happens next? Well, he'll go to heaven, and I'll have got my revenge. So you can see through the repetition of the words now and then and, you can see that he's building that logical argument. And then he finishes that off by saying that would be scanned. So in this context, scanned means examined or to look closely at. So he's saying, if that's the logical progression of events, I need to think about that a little bit more deeply. So he says, a villain kills my father, and for that, I, his sole son, did this same villain send to heaven. So that phrase, sole son, brings the focus on that sense of family obligation. So you can see that Hamlet feels like the need for revenge is really stemming from his position as his father's only son. So it's not so much that he feels that he needs to get revenge, it's that he's obliged to get revenge as a result of his family position. Then we have that nice phrase, to heaven. So I hope that you know what I'm going to say here because we've talked about it so many times. But having that phrase all alone on the line means that it's breaking the iambic pentameter. So that emphasises the flaw in the logic that he's set up. So he's basically said, if I kill him now, he's going to go to heaven, and that's not really a punishment. So then he has the exclamation, oh, this is higher in salary, not revenge. So it's a payment, no, it's not a punishment. And then he goes into the details of exactly why that's an unfair way for Claudius to die. So he says, he took my father grossly, full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown, as flush as May. So that basically just means that because King Hamlet didn't have the opportunity to confess just before his death, he hasn't had the opportunity to repent of his sins. And so that means that's the reason why he's gone to purgatory or to hell. So if you go back to when the ghost originally appears and speaks to Hamlet and has that very deep and disgusting description of what his life is like in the afterlife, you can see that he definitely has had that experience of the afterlife. He definitely has gone to purgatory or hell. So then he has the question, and how his audit stands, who knows, save heaven. So who knows how long it's going to take King Hamlet to be able to get into heaven, because he might be there for all eternity, or he might be able to pay off his sins depending on how bad they were and exactly what he hadn't confessed to. But he says, but as it is at the moment, in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him. At the moment, it's pretty bad for him. At the moment, the experience of Hamlet Senior is really quite awful. And so then Hamlet's follow-up on that, Hamlet's logical progression of his thought then is, am I then revenged to take Claudius in the purging of his soul when he's fit and seasoned for his passage? So he's saying, if I kill Claudius while he's praying, he will have had forgiveness for anything that he's repenting for, which means that he'll go to heaven. So again, we've got the exclamation of no, which breaks the rhythm. So again, that's mimicking the break in the logic that he's just outlined. And so then he speaks to himself, up sword. So he's got his sword out at the moment, and he was holding it quite threateningly through the beginning of the speech. So when he says up sword, he's pulling it away, he's pulling it up so that he's no longer holding it in a threatening position. And then he says, and know thou a more horrid hent. So he's saying, I'm going to use this sword to do something much more horrible than killing a man while praying. So this is him cold-bloodedly intending to commit a really heinous act. And then he goes into that in more detail. So Hamlet says that he will only kill Claudius when he is drunk asleep or in his rage or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, at gaming, swearing, or about some act that has no relish of salvation in it. So that there is the enumeration of the situations that would be acceptable when he would be willing to kill Claudius in order to make his revenge complete. And this is something that a lot of critics throughout the ages, this is a point where they begin to dislike Hamlet. So up till this point, he's been torn between his duty to his king and the human crime of murder, and his duty to his father and the heavenly crime of not fulfilling a father's expectations. But at this point, he is no longer just torn between these two ideas of morality. He's now actually planning to kill someone deliberately so that they'll go to hell. So a lot of critics throughout the ages have been really critical of Hamlet for this moment. You'll have to decide what you think it means about his personality. Does it mean that he's finally, with the theatrical device, just decided that he is definitely going to fulfill his vow? So then his final little section of this soliloquy is that once he finds Claudius doing something dreadful, he's going to trip him, so kill him, and then his heels may kick at heaven. So that's some nice imagery there. So if you imagine Claudius walking towards heaven and then Hamlet killing him so that he falls and his heels kind of come towards the gates, but then he falls down to hell. So it's a bit of imagery there. And then his soul maybe is damned and black as hell, so a nice little simile there. And then he says, my mother stays, so my mother's waiting for me, I better go, I can't stand here and talk all day. And then he ends by addressing Claudius, which of course Claudius can't hear because this is a soliloquy, but he says, this physic, this medicine, but prolongs thy sickly days. So that's metaphorical. And he's just returning to that imagery of disease which we've seen occurring throughout the entire play. He's just saying that the fact that Hamlet isn't willing to do it right now, it's just prolonging Claudius's existence. It doesn't mean that he's not going to kill him in the long run. So then Hamlet leaves and Claudius rises. So again, we've got that visual significance of the stage directions there. Claudius has spent the soliloquy in a vulnerable position, and now he's risen. He's come back into his own power. And he has just two lines. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. And that creates an enormous sense of dramatic irony. So the whole reason why Hamlet hasn't acted, because Claudius is praying, it's not valid, it's not true. Claudius wasn't really praying. He was kneeling and he was thinking about how glad he was that he killed his brother. And so as the audience, we know that because we've just heard Claudius's soliloquy. So it makes it so much more painful for Hamlet to not carry through on the act while he has the chance, out of some misguided sense of morality. Okay, so that's the end of Act 3, Scene 3. The next one's an important scene as well.